Good evening. I have had the pleasure of serving as the chair of the ASLO Awards Committee for the past year or so. And before we make our move to opening the sake container or drum there, we this evening will have a great segue before our celebration in celebrating the careers of really notable scientists in our society, which is what the Redfield Lifetime Achievement Award is all about. As you see here, it's to recognize and honor major long-term achievements in the fields of ethnology, oceanography, including research, education, service to the community and society. So where do I go down? And this year, we have the pleasure of having two people whose careers have been very important in our society, Winfried Lampert and Maciej Gliwicz, are recognized jointly this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about them. What I want to first mention in terms of the process that we go through in the awards committee is very important to have people to nominate people in the society, and I would encourage you to do more of that. In the case of Professor Gliwicz, we nominated by Richard Chost. There were letters from Nelson Hairston, Henri Dumont, Moshe Goffin. For Professor Lampert, it was nominated by Nelson Hairston, Martin Bersma, Wayne Witzbaugh, Craig Williamson, and Robert Payne, with letters from Maciej himself, Gene Likens, Bob Sterner, Asit Mazumdar. Now, this is just a brief excerpt from the citation that you can look at in more detail that talks a little bit about their careers. I'll read some of this. Gliwicz and Lampert have each contributed extraordinary amounts to the depth and breadth of our understanding of the roles that zooplankton play in the dynamics of lake ecosystems. Their studies of the responses of Daphnia to its physical environment, food resources, competitors, and predators have been instrumental in establishing its key position in the ecological dynamics of the limnetic zone. Both have received the Naumann and Thienemann medals of the ASLO Society. Both have been chosen for the Ecology Institute Prize in Limnetic Ecology as a result of these excellent books that they've published in that ecology series. Lampert has been elected a foreign member of the Polish Academy of Sciences and is recipient of the Winberg Medal and Russian Hydrobiological Society. Gliwicz is an honorary member of the Ecological Society of America, and it is a genuine pleasure for ASLO to recognize each of them and both of them together for their lifetimes of achievement. Now, before I bring them up, I just want to say that I had the pleasure of having dinner with both of them last night. They've both been challenges to each other through their careers. So if you have someone that's in your audience that's watching what you're saying, every meeting you go to, be careful. You may be on the same stage receiving an award later in life with that same person, and thanking them for doing that to you and keeping you on your toes. So it was a real pleasure. I encourage the young people in the society to introduce themselves. I had a really stimulating conversation with both of these scholars last night. They're still really, really dynamic people to talk to. So with that, I would like to invite the two Redfield Award recipients, and please join me in giving them a very welcoming reception. Both come up, please.
Could I just say, I wasn't scheduled for this, but both of these fine scientists were inspirations to me particularly. I met them both when I was a graduate student, which shows what a young graduate student I must have been. They were gods and heroes to me for the excellent work that they both did. And it's just such a thrill to be able to give you each this wonderful award. Thank you so much for the wonderful things you've done to advance our knowledge in limnology. Thank you so much.
So now that they have to share their time, I'll invite Professor Lampert, our president, to sit down and allow Maciej to, about 12 minutes each they get, to give their acceptance speech.
Okay, I'll enjoy it later. Well, thank you very much. Of course, this award is not only a great honor and a joy I'm sharing with Winfried Lampert today, but it's also an opportunity to recollect some of the bright moments of life and to summon memories of the people I was with in the moments of sudden illumination, the rare moments when you wake in the middle of the night with a joy of understanding or a flash of perception that concludes weeks of monotonous labor and never-ending worry about being unable to perceive the meaning of your data set, even though you intuitively know that there is something very special in them. I guess most of you had similar experience, but it's up to me and Winfried today to give some examples from our lives rather than yours. So let me start with the first example. Yes, that's the right way to do it. Which comes from Cabana-Bassa, reservoir on Zambezi, downstream from better-known Lake Kariba, more specifically from the narrow and deep section close to the dam of this gorgeous gorge of the lake, of the Zambezi. Its water carries a large load of clay, particularly when the reservoir is being mixed in July, August. But from the onset of certification, the clay starts to settle down with increased transparency, allowing for some phytoplankton growth, and the turbidity declining it's in steps, which you can better see when you examine it as daily percent turbidity decline. And this coincides with spectacular changes in the abundance of cladocerans, the water column. These fluctuations showing clear lunar rhythm. And this is apparent in each of the four dominant cladoceran populations, including the largest Daphnia lumhoisii, smaller Cyrodaphnia or Moina, and tiny Busmina. And I must admit that for the first couple of weeks, maybe 2 months, these data were actually collected by chance because there was really nothing else to do while waiting for the equipment, boat, and the master fisherman in the FAO project on which I was serving as a fishery limnologist back in 1982-83. Anyway, periodicity was clearly lunar, even though without any tides involved, and each density peak observed exactly at the time of the full moon, and it was very clear that it had something to do with increased predation at the lunar nights, most likely by a dominant visual planktivore, which was freshwater sardine, Limnothris amyodon, and as it was generated by the changes in the death rate rather than birth rate, here the two shown for Bus Minor as an example. So I did understand it was lunar, but I couldn't understand why the density declines did not start a few days before the full moon, when the growing moon was shining over the lake overnight. I had some sleepless nights, couldn't focus on anything else, until in the middle of one particular night, I got a sudden flash of understanding that was a trap, the lunar trap. I simply finally apprehended that in the equator, on the day of the full moon, the moon and the sun are facing each other with us in between. So at high noon, the sun would be above our heads and the full moon under our feet. But at 18 hours, the large red circle of the sun would slowly be sinking behind the horizon line at this just the time for a glass of whiskey or cup of sake. And then on the other side, this very same moment, the orange disk of the full moon would be jumping out of the horizon line. But night falls, but it's a lunar night when you can still read the newspaper, which I was even underwater, which I was checking by myself. Everything changes the following day when the moon, still very bright, rises an hour later. It's so dark you can, in this hour between the sunset and the moonrise, it's so dark that you can't really see your own hand at the front of your face. And this is the time when nothing can halt Daphnia moving up to the surface to feed on more abundant phytoplankton, completely unaware of the great risk that would come with the light of the rising moon. And the sardines are already there within their own antipodation window, anticipating the feast. And finally, after the boat and the nets and the hosander arrived, we could finally see and catch the sardines and confirm that my hunch was right. The intestines of fish sampled an hour after the moonrise were packed with Daphnia and other Cladocerans. And the message from these lunar periodicity studies is mostly on the importance of rapid changes in illumination for animals which use vision in decision-making. But let me now recount another example of my own illumination from my early days as a PhD student in Warsaw, which was probably more useful than the lunar periodicity bit. Again, it happened in the middle of the night, this time in the lab, at the size microscope. Half asleep, I stirred in the contents of a Daphnia intestine and wondered why it was so different from what I had in the sample from the lake, which was taken from the same place at the same time. And suddenly, in a moment of illumination, I grasped the importance of this difference between the intestine and the real food in the habitat, and understood that most algae and cyanobacteria were simply too big for Daphnia, so they are kind of canopy species, less endangered by herbivory than the undergrowth, and even taking profit from the herbivores which graze down these smaller, fast-growing competitors. Soon it was very clear that there is not only minimum size of particles grazed, but also there is a maximum, and there is also a size-specific filtering rate, which is set by the anatomy of filtering machinery of Daphnia or any other Cladocerans. So a large-bodied Daphnia would be capable of filtering out quite a broad-size spectrum of particles. Sorry for that. But it would never be allowed to become abundant, because it's extremely sensitive to fish predation. On the contrary, the small Daphnia, which often becomes very numerous as less vulnerable to fish, it cannot harvest the large particles. It can be able to feed only on the small ones. Therefore, it won't be as optimistic as the large Daphnia in controlling the abundance of phytoplankton. And even its increased density would not help it to control algal abundance. On the contrary, it would further increase the rate of growth of large inedible algae that may now use the nutrients that are not depleted by the small edible algae. This leading to the replacement of the typical grazing food by a detritus food chain with nutrients trapped for a long time in the inedible fraction of phytoplankton, which is, maybe it was, a good starting point for the studies on microbial loop, algal defenses, top-down cascades, and maybe other things as well. These observations of so long time ago were soon confirmed in the field by analysis of a meticulous data set from one of the IBP lakes in Poland. And together with Uli Sommer's experience from Lake Constance and Winfried's concept of spring clear water phase, they gave the basis of the second plankton ecology group publication. And I would like to finish by expressing my gratitude to the Redfield Award Committee and also to Nelson Hurston and other people writing letters of nomination, and to thank you all for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gliwicz. Professor Lampert.
Which one did you press?
This one is forward.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom, for this nice introduction. And all of you. And thank you, ASLO, of course, for providing a Lifetime Achievement Award. Now, Lifetime Achievement is something not so easy to deal with. And I have worked all my professional life with Daphnia, so I don't need to convince you after Maciej's talk how important Daphnia is. And I decided I would rather try to give something more personal, maybe to the younger generation here, to teach them to have some lifetime achievement. Since I'm here in Japan now for 6 days or so, I've learned that happiness actually is a very important concept of human welfare or the Japanese society or whatever. So I thought about talk about happiness. But how can you get a whole life into 12 minutes? I've been thinking about that a lot until 4 weeks ago, my daughter was extremely happy because she had a paper on phylogenetics of Latimeria in Current Biology. And she got the cover, the front page. She was so proud of this. And when I saw this, I thought, well, this is it, because this is what you really are. You are a living fossil after that long time. So I'm going to talk about what can you learn from a living fossil. And it's going to be a tutorial for the students, and I hope to do it in 12 minutes. This whole thing is based on 3 important decisions in my life. And the first one was in 1968, when I married this beautiful woman. Actually, I have been happy with her for now 44 years. But, so the recommendation is be brave. And then in 1970 already, I had the second important decision to make. Because in 1970 I did my PhD, I finished my PhD, and that was in fisheries biology. And then my boss at the time said, okay, I would really love to keep you here, but I don't need a fisheries biologist, he said. I need a plankton person. And I said, so what? And I changed to Daphnia. And I love this Daphnia now. I'm happy with it for 42 years. And the recommendation is just be flexible. Now, in the 70s, then, this was followed by what I call the roaring 20s in plankton biology or plankton ecology. It was in the first time I met Maciej, actually, at the SIL in 1974 in Winnipeg, when a whole new world of plankton biology opened to me. At that time, we had the end of IBP and the beginning of the plankton ecology group, which meant a lot of changes in paradigms and in thinking. And there was this highlight in 1978 with a symposium in Dartmouth College. But that was so exciting, and I have to acknowledge we would never be able to talk about this if we hadn't Charlie Carefoot at the time, who organized all this. Now, at this time, I met a lot of people that, for me, were the heroes at the time. On the left here, this actually is my supervisor, Hans-Joachim Elster, who gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. And on the right side here, Bob Wetzel taught me that only the best is good. And Tommy Atmanson, changed my whole way of thinking. He taught me that for a biologist there's only one way of thinking, and that is the Darwinian way of thinking. And I learned that from Tommy Atmanson. And from Yvette Atmanson, I learned how to prepare a table for limnology and oceanography. But here, down here, this actually, because I didn't have a picture of him, is a hand note, a written note by Frank Rigler that he presented to me after my first international lecture in 1974 in Winnipeg. And you cannot believe how proud I was at the time. But the recommendation, of course, is listen to the wise people, but don't always follow them. Go your own way. The third decision was already then in 1980. At that time, I was at the University of Frankfurt, and I got an offer for a permanent professorship in Hamburg, which is this here. At the same time, the Max Planck Society approached me, and they said, well, you have to make a decision. You can be, for the rest of your life, a respected German professor, or you come to us. And we give you only 5 years, but we give you piano and you can play. So finally, I decided to take the other offer. Went to Plön, not a very bad place, as you see here, for a limnologist to work, and an institute with a very long tradition. Actually, this is a joke. This is 1900. It's not when I came there, but nevertheless, it took only 5 years when we really built a complete new institute and put in some very fancy equipment. And this resulted in the attraction of scientists from all over the world to come and use this equipment. This has been amazing. Some of them are still here. Look, here's Bob Sterner working in what we call plankton towers. This is John Havel. Stan Dodson has been using it. Maciej, of course, he was in Plön so often, and we worked together. And this in the middle, actually, is Luc de Meester. I didn't have a better, because he actually produced the first Nature paper from this system, but I didn't have another photo. It's just him eating breakfast there. Anyway, you saw it was quite fancy equipment. Now, there was much more coming. Even people not working with the plankton towers. The house, our institute, was full all the time from people from all over the world. Would you believe that Mike Lynch, if you know him today, was a real limnologist when he came to Plön in the early 1980s? And we have Nan Duncan, that we called the mother of the plankton ecology. And this is actually Jim Haney when he sold me his first in situ grazing chamber. The Killam's have been here. And of course, these two guys you all know here, Matt Nelson and Maciej, had to be on this slide. And the recommendation, again, for the youngsters is make friends. You may need them sometime, even if you need something to disagree with. So, I have one more recommendation, and the recommendation is have fun. And I do this deliberately because I have a message to the young people that look for a job. Family can be fun, of course. We know that all. You have some hobby. I have been scuba diving all my life, and I have made at least 60 underwater movies, so that was fun for me to relax. But work can be fun. Don't ignore that. And for me, especially, I had all these little ladies here, and they were great fun. So, then I have the final recommendation. I just learned that there are many people here who are not members of SIL, just registered here, but you should be a member of ASLO. No, Brian confused me. So not members of ASLO. So I said, you should also not only be a member of SIL, you should also be a member of ASLO. I don't really care if the A means American or association. But what I've highlighted here is the L+O. Because what ASLO has is it has limnology and oceanography. And I think these two things belong together. I could never in my life understand, as a biologist, why 35 grams of salt in the water should change fundamental biological processes. And I've just counted recently, 6 of my former students and postdocs are now professors in marine biology because they are very similar processes. Plus, if you are a member of ASLO, you may one day be given an award. This is really nice. So, finally, I can only thank you, thank the officials of ASLO, thank all the people who cared for the two of us and wrote all these letters also, and you for listening to this commemorations of a living fossil on a day, I would say that is probably one of the most important events of my life, of my scientific life. Thank you so much.
Once again,